Benjamin. This is my ninth tournament that I went to. I only lost two. I believe I won four of them, and three I had like a draw for first. So this was the one that I won at. I have three games, and the first game was against I don't even know how to pronounce that. It's Sadhakal Bagley. It's Saadhikal. Um, their family. It's actually like a whole family. It's her sister, her father. Her father's a FM, so he's been training them, and they've been going. And I actually won against this game, and I share it pretty soon. Let me really quick. I'm sharing this to the group really quick, and then I'll get started. Give me 1 second. The opening, I was black, by the way, for this one. I played my perk defense, the one that I've been playing forever. That's my go-to for this. So let's see here. All right, finally share it to my group. And almost ready to get started. Hope everyone's day is doing pretty well. And okay, so how to flip this around? Hope I can flip this around. Sure, it's possible. There it goes. Good. All right, so you'll see it from my view. E4, D6, the perk. She played D4, and I always play knight to F6 in this situation for the perk setup. Knight to C3. These are all standard moves. G6. There's not much really to talk about for this. Knight F3. Classical variation. Bishop G7. And Bishop F4. This is the first time it's still in the opening phase, but I'm not too familiar with this line. What I'm used to seeing is bishop to E3 or bishop to E5 here. Those are the most common two moves, and because usually after that, the queen will go to D2 to try to drop the dark square bishops. That did not happen at all in the game. She did not look very familiar with the lines. I can tell she was a little bit confused. So I purposely, during the game, I made it as complicated as possible, just so she can waste her time, and it worked out well. But yeah, normally the moves I'm used to are these two moves and then queen to D2. And usually after bishop, I can actually move the knight. So a lot of people usually play that first. That's very common. But as I said, she played bishop to F4, which is a line I'm not very used to, even though it is a standard move. I'm not used to it. I castled. Bishop C4. And here, I always play a certain line. It's really weird because the master's database, if you're looking at it, like I am right here, you will see that black has 0 wins in this position. Well, actually, there's 2 of them, actually. Knight takes E4. That's actually what I played. So never mind. I thought it was 0, but if you scroll down more, the least move played is the one that actually won. That's the same move that I played in the game. So that's actually a little bit interesting, but not a whole lot. Give me a second here. The point of this move here is that after he captures back, I can play D5, forking the pieces. So I win my piece back. This tactic doesn't win you anything. It's more of a positional thing, because after the exchange and after taking either or, what ends up happening is that this bishop becomes more active. This pawn right here kind of, usually can block it off. Usually sometimes they play e5 depending. Sometimes a knight moves, and they basically block it all off. So it's very normal to actually capture in that type of position for me. So that's pretty much what I played. Let me see here. She captured here, and I played d5. And you can either move the knight here or the bishop. It doesn't matter. When you move the bishop, people normally play bishop to d3 to recapture, which is perfectly fine. Some people have basically moved the knight out the way and allowed the capture to happen, which doesn't make a lot of sense. This is a little better to take back, but I've seen a lot of people play their knights here just to have more protection around the king. And she did play bishop to d3, which is what I normally see in that position. You also can play c3 here as well and let me decide what I want to capture. So I capture back. Oh, thank you. I'm in my 30s. I forget exactly how old I am. Hold on a second. I'm 36. It's not a school tournament. It's an actual tournament, like a United States Chess Federation. I actually go to I had to pay money to enter and play a tournament at United States Chess Federation. So it's actual rated tournaments. It's not a scholastic one. All right. And after bishop takes e4, over here, I have to be careful. The reason I have to be careful is because if I bring my bishop out for any reason, I would be dropping this pawn and also be losing the rook right here. My rating, my actual United States Chess Federation rating is 1189. But after this win, it was estimated to be 12. I think it was 1233. But it's not exactly sure right now. So I placed first in my category. It was quads. They had 5 different categories, and I placed first in my category. All right. So after bishop to e4, which was playing the game, like I said, I have to be mindful of this capture. So I can't play here. All right. I'll share the link in the group. I'm not going to share it in the YouTube, but I'll share it in the group. Yeah, I'll share the link in the group with you guys. I'm perfectly fine with that. Yeah, I'll wait until after the video is over, and I'll look it up and I'll send it to you guys. You're not in the chess group with mine? The beginner chess club or school for under 1,000? Not sure if you're in that or not. Oh, okay. All right. I'll add a link after the video is over, and I'll put it inside the comments section for you then. I thought you were in the group. So as I said, I normally don't move the bishop out because I have to be careful. So basically the development of the bishop in this situation is pretty difficult. Here I play c5. I was perfectly fine with giving up the pawn because if he takes it, I can take his pawn. So it's like exchange. It's not an actual loss. So that's why I played in the game. That's usually usually to play c5 or e5 at some point to attack the center. Because basically, if you look at the pieces right now, white has lots of pieces in the center, which is very good for him. And in this opening, you allow that on purpose, even though it's normally good for your opponent, because you plan on counterattacking the center with either c5 or d5, and then eventually bring out your pieces. if you could become cramped in this opening, a lot of people become cramped and they don't like the perk. You just trade. Whenever your position is cramped, you want to trade your pieces to uncramp your position. And she played c3 here. Instead of taking, she plays c3. That way, if I take, she takes back, and keeping a pawn in the center. If she didn't do that, I would have considered taking it just so that I can basically get rid of all her center pawns. And I would have one center pawn over here, which eventually I would try to cause a problem and try to bring it up the board and eventually try to make a queen. Usually I will use the f and e pawn together to counteract the f pawn with my pieces supporting it. That's usually what I try to do when that trade happens. But in this case, she plays c3, stopping that trade. I mean, stopping the me having the extra pawn in the center. I captured, and she captured back. And here I thought for a bit. So we're still basically in opening theory here. I didn't know that at the time. Queen of b6 is the move that I played. And here, basically, I'm attacking the pawn, and as well, I'm attacking the pawn on b2 as well. Attacking both pawns. And pretty much, I was looking forward to maybe even bringing the rook in. And if I have to, the knight, to constantly attack this pawn right here. Because right now it's isolated. Isolated pawns are usually weaker than regular pawns because they can't be defended on either side with another pawn. So basically, you only can defend it with a piece. So I was looking to target it, and even go after the knight to basically take it because it's defending it, to try to basically take the pawn because that pawn is pretty much weak. So that was the idea with queen of b6. Also possibly with a check at some point and also trying to weaken squares. That was the idea behind queen to b6 there. And she played queen to d2, defending the pawn, still keeping an eye in here, and also still connected with the bishop, which is actually a really good idea. That's what I expected in this situation, and that's exactly what was played. And here, instead of playing knight to c6, which is what I considered before that, the reason why I didn't play it was because I was concerned about d5. I wasn't exactly sure what to do if d5 was played. So I decided not to do that. I figured if I played knight to d7, maybe knight to f6, eventually trade that off, and maybe use my knight to come in and attack. That's pretty much what my ideas were in the game. Let me see something here real quick. Okay. And castle was played. And here, there's no games that were at this point. So basically, we went up to move 12 is what we went up to where we were still in the master database. So after that, after move 12, it turned into a regular game. And here I played knight to f6, and I already explained my ideas of what I was doing and why. Bishop to d3. And for some reason here, I started to thinking that I was going to be able to win the pawn. I was looking at ways to do it because the knight, I figured if I can take it, this is behind. I for some reason miscalculated that, and I thought I couldn't win it. But it still worked out fine in my favor. And I immediately attacked the knight. I figure if I take it and she takes back, that I'll be able to win this pawn here very soon. That was bishop to g4, bishop to e2. And when I kind of realized that I wasn't going to be able to win this pawn very easily, I started to look for more tactics and more ideas of like what else I can do and why. Like, what's the point of like I already pretty much is more developed and has more pieces out than I do. And I counterattack the center. I try to go after this pawn and try to quit weaning because I just realized if I take and she takes back, that I can't really attack the pawn again immediately in a very easy way because it can be just defended. And obviously, if it's push, it'll be attacking the queen. So I'm like, I didn't want to get into that position. So I decided to try knight to e4. Knight to e4 was my move. And I figured that if you want to defend the pawn, these are the only two squares to go to, or even here as well, but then I can attack with the rook. So I assume these are the only two squares. And if obviously undeveloping is usually bad, so I figured I can try to do some type of attack that way. And that was my idea behind it. And that's exactly what was played. Bishop, queen down. And then bishop here. That's exactly what was played, is what I thought would be played here. And I tried to complicate it and not trade just to run down the clock. Because in the opening, I already knew what I was doing for a lot of it, and she was using a lot of time. So I decided to, knight to e4. Knight to e4 was to attack the queen and to try to force her on a square where I can attack again. Because in this position here, if it was my move, I can just play knight takes f2, and I'll be attacking the queen twice, and the queen will be forced to move, and then I can bring it back, and this will be a lost pawn, and the king side will be a little threatened, and I'll be able to eventually take. So I figured it's a small tactic. I didn't think she would fall for it, but I felt that it was enough to waste more time because it was 30 minutes a game. And I felt like it was solid enough to play. I don't want to play a risky, crazy move that's not going to work and then be bad for me, but at least aggressive enough to make my opponent think, waste more time on their clock, and that way towards the end game, it'll be easier to win, which is pretty much what happens. So it worked out pretty well. Queen to b5 was the move. This was unexpected. This was actually the first unexpected move. And like I said, I didn't want to trade lots of stuff because my goal was to run on the clock. And if I made it very easy, it can be drawish. And I didn't want to draw. I wanted to win. And after a long consideration, I couldn't move back. I thought about it. I couldn't move back that way. I even considered knight to d6 to attack the queen. But my concern was if I did that, if she were to take and I take back, and then the bishop takes and I take back, that I'd have double pawns and then an isolated pawn. And I felt like my position was fractured, that it wouldn't be very good for me. And this pawn will be blocked easily by the bishop. And the bishop would have lots of control. And then a move like even, a4, b3, and then the bishop can move back and forth and having lots of control over these squares. So I didn't like that. And that's why I went against it. But that was my first thought. And I also didn't like the idea of trading the queens. So basically I decided to capture this way. Now, just to be clear, it's not a very principled move. The reason why it's not a very principled move is because in the Perk and the King's Indian, but in the Perk in this case, this bishop is meant to stay on g7 or even h8 and be a monster on the diagonal. I gave it up to win a pawn. I figured I can win a pawn in this situation, and if we try to win a pawn back, I thought of going here until I realized that I couldn't, and then I'm like, kind of wondered what I was doing, but I felt like it was still pretty well, but it wasn't. I didn't calculate too far ahead, and I kind of wasn't sure if I did a good job or not. But it actually turned out that it was perfectly fine. I was a little confused in some of the stuff, but I also understood enough of what I was doing. She did capture, and the only move I can play would be capture back. And here, as I said, I kind of knew that I couldn't move my rook. I couldn't move my rook to be one like I wanted. So here I had to think for a minute and try to figure out what to do here. And I'm like, okay, I can't move my rook here, but I came up with e5. E5 was the move that I eventually came up with. I didn't consider this at the time, but I'm not entirely sure if that would have been good or not. Because she would take here, and I would have taken the bishop. And then that would allow me to bring my rook in. But then this pawn is available, and it would have fractured the pawn structure here, but this would have been a passed pawn. So it's just, I didn't consider it at the time, but afterward I realized that it might have been good because I could have taken the bishop. And if not, I'm threatening this bishop. So it was because it wasn't my line of thinking. My line of thinking was moving my rook, so I didn't consider at the time. But that would have been a really nice tactic just to waste more time. Even though it wouldn't have been winning, it would have still been even, and it would have wasted even more time on my opponent's clock, which I have more time. So I was looking to complicate and just waste my opponent's time, basically. E5. And bishop e3 is the only good move, I believe. And she found it. And at that point, I felt like I was losing the pawn. That no matter where I move my queen, she can just take the pawn here and then move it back out the way. I'm like, oh wow, I messed up pretty bad. This is where I felt like I might end up not doing super well. I decided instead of moving my queen here down to d6 is my first thought, I moved it down to d8. And the reason why I moved down to d8 is because I felt that I have more, I can go on either side. And I already have 2 pieces on the king side. And I felt on d6, I couldn't do that. So that is the reason why I moved to d8. I considered also moving to d5, but I went against it because of the pin. I didn't like the idea of the knight being pinned. Even though you couldn't really take advantage of it, I just didn't want my pieces tied down. I wanted my pieces more mobile. So that is why I went down to queen to d8. And f3 was unexpected for me. I did not expect that move at all. I was expecting my pawn to be gone and then me trying to fight to make sure that I didn't lose on these 2 squares. So that's basically where I got lucky at. This is where I basically got lucky at, is where when she played f3, I'm like, okay, not taking this pawn and not marching up the board to make another queen. So I was pretty happy. And now I play knight to d6. I wasn't playing knight to d6 before. I did consider knight to f6. The problem with that is the bishop. I didn't want the bishop attacking and also the queen eventually coming up and attacking again. And I didn't really see a very good defense. Now that I'm looking at it, I had king to g7. At the time, I did not think of any defense at all. And I'm like, wow, I would pretty much lose if I bring the knight back. But that's not actually the case. So I moved my knight back here. Queen's under attack, queen to b4, which I immediately recognized that there might be some issues here. And I played a really odd move because I wanted to protect my pawn. Knight to c8. And after I was concerned with queen to b7, but then I'm like, well, I can just move back. And then if she were to move back, then I would have considered to do something else. I'm not entirely sure exactly what I would do or if I would have repeated, but I didn't like it too much. Even if I didn't play d6, I may have even played knight to e7 if that were to happen, just to not repeat. But I also wanted to protect the pawn, and this right here would be taking the rook. So I kind of would have been forced to move, but that wasn't played either. What was played was rook a to d1, and the queen. The move played, and I was pretty happy about that. And I just went to queen f6, and that's when I realized that if I move my knight out the way, it'll be fine. I mean, there's here, but it can adequately be defended. So at that point, I was pretty happy. And here, bishop to d3 was played, and that confused me a bit. And the reason why that confused me is because this bishop wasn't doing much, and this rook had control of this file, and I felt like I thought she was going to double up, and I was a little concerned. And when this was played, I didn't know where to put my bishop. I can't move here or here. This is bad as well because you can just move out the way and attack. So I only had one square available for my bishop, and that would have been down to e6. And I decided to just capture. The bishop pair is available. It's an open board. And even though I wasn't in the mood for trading and I was in the mood to run down the clock as much as possible, I decided to take anyways, just because of the bishop pair. And the only logical move after that is to capture back. And at this point, I kind of was worried about eventual maneuvering with the bishop. So I decided to preemptively move the rook in hopes to get control of this as I try to open this up. I'm going to eventually try to open this up at some point, is what I was thinking of. And I didn't want this to happen. And I wanted my knight to be able to go somewhere at some point. So I was kind of thinking about all those things, and I moved rook to e8 just because I also didn't want the pin. And here, the next move we'll play is queen to b5, which attacks the rook that's undefended. And my idea was to move my knight anyways. So now I just decided where to move my knight. So obviously, so the rooks can defend each other. And the reason why I didn't play knight to d6 because I was, again, concerned about this. And I just didn't want all that extra pressure on my knight. So I figured knight to e7 is fine, and that maybe I can eventually come in to attack in this direction. And I have my queen here already. So I was kind of thinking of this will be better square than this square, because here I'm going to go to f5 and not to e4. So that was what I was thinking. The reason why I'm explaining all my thoughts as well is because I want to review this later on as I get better to watch my games and what I'm doing and why. And I want to understand my thinking fully as best as I can. And I'm not expecting my opponents to look at my games. I think after a certain rating, after a certain point, I probably should stop and just make them all private for myself, or just share them with my group and my group only. Here, she played rook to d7, which I was not expecting. I was looking at my moves, not any counter moves. And I'm like, wow, that's a very principled move, having the rook on the 7th rank. And this pawn is still not being captured yet. And I'm like, yeah, that was a little bit concerning for me. But like I said, I felt that it was fine, that I was still doing okay. And here, because the time was already low, I felt like I can start going into an endgame and not risk any more issues. So I went queen to c6, knowing that as a possible trade. And obviously, the only real defense is that. And at that point, I'm like, well, what do I do? And I figure I can attack the bishop and then maybe get into something where I can attack the pawns at some point. So I was trying to think of stuff like that or trade, which is what I wanted. I wanted a trade to happen here. And I assumed it would happen because time was low as well. And the trade did happen. And that actually was I felt like it was very good for me. Rook to c7, attacking the knight, which means I just had to move it. And I already had plans to bring the knight in. I didn't want to move back in a round, and I felt that if it was captured, then I would have a passed pawn. So I'm like, this is good for me. I have a knight and a good outpost, and it's a very principled move. And that if it's captured, I would have a pretty good passed pawn, and I was happy with that. She did not capture and played rook to d1, attacking it for a second time. And then I defended it because I wanted the capture to happen and I wanted to push up and maybe eventually try to get in there, is what I was thinking. B3 was played, which I thought was very odd. I think because she didn't know what to do, she wasted a pawn move. If you ever play a game where you're not sure what to do not move a pawn because pawns do not go back. Something like rook to b7 is fine because you can go back and forth without ruining your structure. This right here, I felt was it wasn't a bad move, but it's a commitment. So I didn't like it. And this is where I felt like the pressure was getting to her when she did that. I don't because like I said, her dad is a master, so I'm sure she may have heard at some point about that, is my guess. And here I cannot read it. It looks like knight e to d2, but it's knight to e2 check. So I have to fix this on my paper when I get a chance. I can't right now. I don't have my pencils. But knight to e2 check is the move I played because that was a blunder. And hold on one second here. Something is wrong. Okay, that's what was wrong. I'm looking at this, and it didn't make any sense to me. Yeah. I found this because I felt that was, yeah, okay. I was trying to think of my thoughts, and I'm like, I didn't remember my next move, and it was here, and I remember now. I knew I felt that was wrong, and I didn't remember why, but now I remember why, because I called check and was able to win the rook. Yeah, and I felt that was, yeah, okay. It makes sense now. I was a little confused. All right. And that's why I'm doing this right away. Because if I take my time and do this tomorrow, I'm going to forget even more stuff. King to f1. Take the rook of check. King takes rook to a1. Attacking the pawn and allowing myself to control that if I wanted to. Because you want your rooks on your opponent's 7th. For white, it's the 7th. For black, it's the 2nd. A4 was played, which is what I expected. And here I played f6. And the reason why I played f6 here was simply because I didn't really think too much about this, and I wanted to make sure my pawn was protected. I didn't want him to play or her to play e7, which is for some reason I was concerned about. It would have been better maybe for f, but the bishop as well. So this is where I was unsure of what to do, and I played f6 to protect his pawn because I was worried about the pawn, which, like I said, it's not a very move. It would have been much better for me to play almost anything else, even rook to b8, so that way you can take the pawn and I can take the pawn back. Like, even that's fine, or even something like that would even be fine because I was losing no matter what, and I decided to protect this way. This was my pawn bad move. Rook to c6, attacking my weak pawn. And I had an idea. Either I'm going to move my king up or I'm going to go after his pawns. And I felt like because I was up a little bit, that I might as well just go for the pawns and just attack and allow counterattack while attacking. King to f1. That I think was a bad move. It probably been better to come up, because if I would have called check again, and if I would have called check again, and even if I would have traded, this king with these pawns could try to march down with the aid of the bishop to make a queen. That would have been a lot better off. This cut the king off. So I was pretty happy about that. And this is rook to d8. I didn't take much thought into these moves because time was a little low for both of us, but I had like a bit more. Rook to c1 to protect because I was trying to checkmate. Rook to b2, attacking the pawn because, I mean, why not attack the pawn, right? It's basically for free. And g3 was played, which I didn't understand. I'm assuming it was just for time purposes. Bishop takes a7. Finally lost that pawn. That pawn was like a goner forever. And here I played rook takes h. I'm a little confused. I don't think I took there. I do not think I took there. Okay, I messed up on my notation because it says rook takes f3 to check and king to g2, which wasn't possible. So this is where the notation stopped. I think here I didn't take here. I believe I played this move instead to attack this way. And then the bishop came back. Now, at this point, the notation was over. We didn't finish the notation, but I ended up winning this pawn. And then eventually what I did was trade the rooks and move my king up. And then traded rook for bishop because I had extra pawn. And I basically eventually promoted my pawn and made a queen. That's pretty much what I did. So the notation stopped here, even though we played longer, because at this point I had less than a minute in the clock, and I basically wanted to finish. That was pretty much it. I clicked analysis. Oh, it's not going to show up. Okay, I don't want to do that. All right, that's perfectly fine. I'm not going to worry about that. Let's reset. So that was my first game. I'll look at it with a computer later. You can always use a computer if you wanted to, if you were interested. But I want to get my own thoughts and analysis first. And that way, when I go over for a computer, I can watch it and go over it again for myself, just for my own personal mind. The second game, it was Benjamin, which is me, versus Preston Shepard. He looked really young. He was like between 19 and 21. And I started with E4, E6. Now, I've only learned one thing against the French defense, and that is the King's Indian attack. So I played D3. The sides are random. They just decide the first game. They just basically randomize it, and normally you play every other one. So basically, I played black, so I played white, and then I played black. That's how it normally played. Very rarely you would play the same color twice in a row, but usually they have it every other game. You're white and one game black, so it's randomized. He played D5, which is standard. Knight to D2, which is very normal. The reason why, if he takes, you take back with a pawn. If you take back with a knight, I don't think that's I think that's bad actually. If he goes, yeah. But instead of playing knight to F6 and me worrying about a weird capture here, because if I were to take, he would take back, and then the queens would be traded. That's why it's normally better that when you capture, you take back with the pawn. Like if let's say this happened, I would take back with the pawn. And I don't have to worry about the queens being traded and me losing castling rights. That's the normal idea for this. He played C5. He did not play knight to F6, which is what I'm used to. So he played a little bit differently. Knight to F6, knight to F3, knight to C6. So he's basically developing the normal way. And bishop to D6. This is the first move that I was not familiar with. And I know he was confused from the beginning. He probably didn't know that this was an actual opening against the French. Because he looked kind of confused very early on. And pretty much what I did here was I was considering C3 here. That was the move that I was considering. And I went against it. I kind of was worried about the knight coming in, and I'm like, what if I can push these pawns up? I'm like, what if he plays queen to B6 and he attacks the center that way? So I kind of went against C3, but that was my first idea. That was my first thought, is C3. So here, I decided just to develop normally and get ready to castle. And he played knight G to E7, which is a move that I've never seen. So like there's two moves back to back that I was confused about. And what do? I castle. Why not castle, right? It's a principal move. I don't understand exactly what's going on at this point. I got a little confused. But that's what I decided to go with. I figured my structure in the center was solid and sound. And then he plays knight to G6. And here I am. My knowledge of the opening, I've never learned what to do in something like this. I'm like, do I kick the knight out? Do I attack the knight with the bishop at some point? I mean, I didn't know, because in the King's Indian attack, I move my pawns up. I get my knights in here. I bring it around and I attack. That's what I do in the King's Indian. And with this knight here, it was really odd. So I had to maneuver. I played a lot of weird moves because I had to maneuver and try to figure out what to do here. And he castled. Here, I already calculated that if I take, he can't take back because of the pin. I actually considered taking first and then calling check, but then his bishop will be open. So I decided against it, and I just played rook to e1 because why am I going to let his bishop in the game? It doesn't make any sense for me. So I continue with what I already learned in the King's Indian attack. And I still was unsure, but I felt like because I learned it, because this is what I know how to do, because I decided to continue even though I was unsure if it was even worth doing. And when I moved my knights around, he also looked confused, so I know he didn't know what was going on. And he played bishop to c7. And he just basically didn't want to waste his time to figure out a move. I think he was waiting to see what I was doing. And I had no attacks, so for him doing that is perfectly justified. I played h3, getting ready to tuck my knight away. This knight can go here or here. After I move this pawn up, this knight can move here or here. And I have control over lots of squares in the center. So h3 looks like I'm not doing anything, but it is actually a lot. After that, rook to e8 was played. I played knight f to h2 here, getting ready to, like I said, I'm maneuvering my pieces around, getting it situated. Knight g to e5. And here, it's like he solved my problem for me with his knight. And it took a while to think about it. I'm like, I can attack his knight, and if he were to move back, maybe I can attack it again, maybe not. And then I'm like, if I attack it again, he can move back. So I was trying to find a way to trap his knight so he had no squares to attack it. That's what I was looking at. So I played f5 here. I already knew my job is to attack with my pawns. Oh yeah, he plays c5, so I'm pretty sure, and his bishop is locked in, so it would have been very difficult for him to castle queenside. And for me, in the King's Indian attack, I always castle short. I don't castle long side. Long side castling against the French is probably for a different variation. I always play the King's Indian attack, and I always castle kingside, and I always push my pawns up with my kings on this side, and it works out beautifully. And you'll see this. And if you actually put it in the computer, I'm pretty sure I played it correctly. I'm pretty sure it's probably not all the best moves, but I'm pretty sure it was pretty solid. Knight to g6 here. And here I decided to knock off his knight. I decided to prevent him from coming in. I decided to prevent him from bringing his bishop out. And I decided to prevent him from coming back here so I can attack it. So right here I played e5 just to solidify my space. And he played bishop to b6, which at first looks to me dubious, but I figured he might be planning to call check. And then I thought about it, and I'm like, well, if he calls check, then I can just move up, right? But these are attacking. So now, c3. I figured if he wants to call a check, I'll play c3. I'll allow him to play check, and I'll just go ahead. And he actually did play c3 here. And I was very happy because I got to play d4, and his bishop move became pointless, and he helped me close this down. So not only am I attacking his king side, the center's closed, and there's no attack on the wing side, which means I have a lot more space, and all my pieces are coming in to attack. And it's like I right here, I felt like I was winning. I just had to maneuver my pieces properly to win, but I felt like I was winning. I just had to prepare and prepare and prepare. Here he played knight c to e7, bringing his other knight in to help out his king, which makes sense. And here I played knight to e3. I was making sure that I had the square covered. And here he played a5, which I was very confused about. And I was considering, do I need to play a4 here? Do I need to play e3? Do I continue here, allow him to push and play e3? I was considering a lot of little weird stuff and trying to figure out how to maneuver properly. And I realized that I can just play h4 and then kick the knight back. So even if I play h4 and he moved, I can just kick the knight back and basically bring my queen in and try to get my knight in at some point, like to come in. So I was looking at all of that, and I felt that h4 right here would be better. So that's what I played. Knight e to f5 was played, which if he decides to take my knight, that's fine for me. I can just take it back. So I wasn't worried about it. I decided to just kick his knight out, and if he wants to trade, then he will have no pieces in front of his king. So I was perfectly happy with that. So I play h5, knight takes e3. I considered capturing here, but the queen will be hanging, so I didn't do it, but I did consider it. And then when I realized it, I just took with the bishop. Bishop takes e3. I didn't take too much time on that move because I didn't want to run my clock down. Knight to e7. So now he has no pieces in front of his king. And that made me, I'm like, I can just play g4 here. I can bring my rook in, my queen in, maybe my knight. I'm like, I'm slowly squeezing his king, and he has no play against me here. So I was feeling pretty happy about that. And I played g4. I figured to get right on that. And he surprised me with f5. I didn't consider that at all. Like, at all. And after some thought, I realized that I can just take. And I almost didn't do it because I'm like, what if he doesn't know what el passant is? Like, for some reason in my mind, I thought that he might not know what it is. Which is ridiculous because if you're in a tournament, of course you know what en passant is. And I figured if I do take it, I would be able to bring my knight in. And they won't be attacked by any pawns. And I'm like, this is beautiful. So I took it. I considered for a little bit, and what sold it for me was the fact that my knight had that square. G to f6. And of course I have to mess this up first. Bishop to h3. I wanted to, if he ever moved up, to counteract his bishop. I wasn't sure if that was a good move or not, but that's what I played. He came in to attack. And here I played rook f1 to help defend my bishop. And I did still want to bring my knight here. This is where I really wanted my knight. And for some reason, I was really fixated on trying to get that rolling. So I did play rook to f1 here. Played b5, getting his queen side. He was trying to start to generate some queenside counterplay. He's seen me shuffling my pieces around, doing a whole lot here. And I guess he probably figured if he breaks this open and he comes out, he can start attacking, which is not a bad idea. I played queen to e1, getting ready to get my queen and break open. Even if he comes down, I still can try to find a way to break open. So that's basically what I was thinking about doing in that situation. Queen to d6, which is a move that I was not expecting also. I didn't consider it. And I decided that this move and my plan is, I thought it still worked, so I went ahead. He played b4. And I considered to care, and I'm like, you know what? I went this far around with it. I am committed. I wasn't sure if it was a good move or not, But I'm like, you know what? I need to get this done. So I just went ahead and played queen. Wait, queen G4, G5. Yeah, I went ahead and played G5 here. I decided just to go for it, and he decided to try to close it up. And here I'm like, after he closed it up, now I can get my knight in here. So it didn't matter if he captured or pushed. Either which way, my knight was coming in here. My queen's behind it, and my bishop. At some point, if I wanted to take it, I was even considering moving my king up to bring my rooks in. So I was really pretty happy here with what I did. King to h8, which I didn't understand because I didn't really have a direct attack against his king. I think I was worried about the pawn like coming up and maybe the queen. It wasn't an immediate threat. Here he played rook to g8. And if you can see the next move, which made him resign, I'll give you a second. If you're watching this after live, you can pause it. All right, I'll go ahead. Knight to f7. That was a beautiful check, and he resigned. That was my second game of the match. And in the first two games, I wasn't in any danger for the most part. The third game, however, that one was the one where I actually almost got checkmated. I forgot to say the ratings of the players as well. I was 1183. The first person I played against was 971. The second game, the person rating was 1114. Now for the third game, I'm gonna get that situated. Let's get to reset it. Here I was black, and if you know me, I always play the perk if given the chance. Even though this one here, my opponent rating was 882. He actually had checkmate threats against me, where I actually really was concerned about my king, and I had to pay attention pretty close. So I really underestimated him. I felt it'd be an easy win, and I thought that if I played a little positionally, he would just blunder a piece, and that did not happen at all. Well, it did happen at the end, but in the beginning, it didn't. It wasn't even a thing. Like, he played pretty well. So e4, yeah. So definitely humbled me a bit. Even though I won this game, it definitely humbled me because, like I said, I could have lost. And the first game, this starts off basically the same way as the first game. Knight f6. There's no point in going over everything again in the same exact video because here is the first different move. Bishop to d3. And at this point, I forgot what I was supposed to play here. And looking at the options here, the most played move is the move I played. I'm not sure if knight to c6 is something that I learned in this variation. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to actually do that. It is a move here. I'm gonna have to review that one. But I went bishop g7, which is the most played move in that position. Knight g to e2, which I thought was a little odd. Castled, he castled. I figured it was no actual immediate danger, so I went ahead. And here, normally, like I said, e5 and c5 are eventually moves. And I played c5 here, which was not a very normal move. He played bishop c4. What I calculated at this point here was like, if he were to take, I can just take back, and this will be open for me. That's what I calculated. He played bishop c4, and after he played bishop c4, I'm like, I have knight here, which is the same thing as before. You know, I also can take here, but he can take back, and I'm like, I didn't know if I wanted to get in a line like that. And I took a minute to think about it, and I decided to just go ahead and do my normal capture in his position. And when I captured here, he took a while and decided to capture the pawn. And I realized I had an opportunity to triple his pawns, and I when I went for it. If I take and he takes back, I take, he takes back. I gave up my dark square bishop. He has triple pawns, and I decided to go for it. I believe looking at this, I don't know why I didn't think about it, but looking at the screen here, this right here looks like a very easy move just to win a pawn. It was a free pawn. Like, I think that's a lot better off because compared to what I did here. But that's okay. I took and I decided to triple his pawns. And I actually played d5 here, which is my first bad move of all 3 games. I really think that was my really bad move that I played. Obviously, if you're looking at it, you can see why. He can just take it. It was actually a free pawn. His bishop is right here. And he played bishop to b3. And at this point, I had to figure out the best way to defend it. And my idea was bishop to e6. And I took a little bit of time. It's been over 2 hours already of chess. And even though this is the move that I really wanted to play here, I ended up playing e6, which is, I think, horrible because look at these pawns. They're all in light squares. I have no dark square bishop. He had dark square bishop. And that with the queen can cause problems. And I literally knew not to play this move. And I eventually just moved it for some reason automatically instead of that move here. So yeah, and he played queen to d4, which obviously if he gets to this move right here, he's already threatening checkmate, which is the only person that I played against that had actual checkmate about. The only person I played against that actually had checkmate threats against me. So that was yeah. I'm definitely kicking myself after that. I'm like, I really wanted this move here. I attacked the queen. I realized that if I attack the queen has no squares to go on this diagonal, so she cannot come down and attack that way. So that was what I did. And then I had to figure out how to make sure that it never happened. And I'm like, wait a second. If I move my pawn up, this bishop is trapped. So I'm like, I'm going to go ahead and get started with that. I'm like, why not? You know, it's a possible trap. He did not fall for it. And here I played e5. And the reason I played e5 here is because if he tried to come down with his pieces and try to move around, I can do f6 and have a pretty nice wall pawn. That's what I was looking to do here, is get a nice wall pawn going. That's why I played e5. Bishop to b2, which I'm like, if he moves a pawn up, I can just block him off. Perfectly happy with that. Didn't bother me at all. So I guess he abandoned his ideas with his queen and bishop, which I assumed he was going to go queen to h6 to bring his bishop to attack the queen if I move this pawn at all. So that's what I assumed he would be doing. But it did not happen. And I was very happy that it didn't happen. Bishop to e6 here. I decided to protect the pawn. because I knew eventually the rooks can come in, and if I moved up for any reason, I just didn't want like counterplay in that way. So I was a little concerned about it. I didn't know exactly what to calculate here. I just knew that I didn't want to deal with that type of counterplay. So I went in and brought the bishop in, rook a to d1. So he started off with what I was concerned with. Here I played f6 because I wanted the nice pawn formation. And also getting ready to push up if he pushes down. And here he played f4, which surprised me. If he'd taken here and I would have taken back, he could have just moved the queen in and actually attacked twice at my bishop, and my bishop was basically pinned. So that would have been actually pretty bad. But he played f4. And after f4, I knew I couldn't take because he would take my bishop with check. And I would consider f5, but if he takes, unless I couldn't take back. And I'm like, can I push? Well, then that runs into here. And that's when I realized that I was in trouble with this whole combination thing of, yeah, that's when I realized I was a little bit in trouble. And I considered moving away, but I'm like, that would just give the pawn for free. And I decided to go with rook to e8 because if I capture, I wanted my bishop defended. That's what I went with. He played c4, which I already knew what I wanted to play if he played c4, and I went ahead and attacked his queen. Queen to f3. And here I considered taking. I was, for some reason, what was I worried about again in this position here? Oh, I forget exactly what I was worried about. I was worried about the queen coming here at some point for some reason. Oh, that's what it was. After the queen moved over, okay, I played h5. It's not yet. I remember it, but I prepared it. All right. I was preparing bishop to g4. He played c3. And here I realized something after I moved. After I played bishop to c4 is when I realized I messed up. I'm like, what if he comes down and calls check? I take, he takes, he's attacking my knight. And if I take this way and he takes my knight, I was worried about my bishop being hanging, but then I realized I can take his bishop. So I'm like, okay, that might be good. And I'm like, what if he calls check? I take, he comes in. And then I'm like, all right, what if instead of taking my knight, he just takes the bishop? And I was worried about him taking and threatening something else. And then I realized I was fine. But for a while, I thought I really messed up here. And he ended up playing queen to d3. So I calculated all that stuff right before playing bishop g4, and then I thought I was fine. And then he played something completely different. And I'm like, all right, that's not bad. I took his piece right here, which I completely missed this capture. I completely missed it. I would have played something different if I seen that. I probably would have played one of these moves. F5 or E4 would have been a move I would have played if I would have seen that. Because he can't take this because the knight. So if I attack the queen, he'd be forced to move again. Then I move the pawn up. Then I can maybe defend it. And maybe I can, be okay that way. But it's not what happened. I took because I didn't see this threat at all. And he played it. I didn't see it, and he played it. And at this point, I realized that if I go back, then it might be perpetual. And I'm like, I don't want a perpetual. I decided to go to King F8. And he went Queen to H6. Wait, not here. Queen to H6 for another check. And I played King to E7. And he played Bishop to D1. And here I realized that he has a mate in 2. If he plays Queen, I have to go up, and he has mate in 2. Which means he had it last round too. But he took the rook. So I could have absolutely lost this game. And I seen it on this move, so I moved King to D7. Like, I realized that I messed up really bad. And then I moved King to D7, which saved me. I was considering Rook to H8, and that's when I realized that he could have checkmated me. So instead, yeah, King to D7 for sure. Queen to H5. And here I realized that I thought about moving my pass pawn, but I figured I want to get my king out of dodge because I was like really concerned after everything that happened. Queen takes, the pawn takes. Pawn takes. The reason I'm not explaining everything here is because I didn't know exactly what I was doing because I was a little bit confused by a lot of stuff. Queen to F7, check. Queen to E7. Queen takes and rook takes. I figured a trade. I wanted to bring this out. I was already a piece up. I'm like, I'm down with a few pawns, but I'm up a piece. So I'm like, you know what? If I get to trade some stuff, I can use my rooks to go ahead and start taking everything. Bishop takes D4. And he resigned. That was pretty much it. So after everything that went on, that was very anticlimactic. But yeah, I could have lost. He had checkmate. And then I kind of wanted to move around, and I'm like, I'm up the exchange, and I wanted to go around everything, and I basically got lucky. This game right here, I should have lost this game. I can't believe I missed this here. I missed a few other things, and the reason why that happened is because the past few months I've been studying between 30 minutes to an hour, so I was way past the hour mark, and my brain was just not working too well. So I did get lucky in that regard. And from now on, I'm gonna have to decide to start studying a lot more than normal because I plan on doing more tournaments and I do not want this to happen again. Even though I won the game, I never want to lose concentration, not know exactly what's going on or how to go about it. So So that's pretty much what happened. And yeah, that was a good tournament. I won. And I definitely will go over this later by myself with an engine and try to figure out more. But those were my thoughts. I wanted to give you my thoughts behind my moves and why I made them. And you will see in the lessons that I give in the groups when it comes to chess principles, a lot of the stuff that I was thinking was stuff that I was teaching. And it was working. It was very helpful. I just had to calculate a few lines as well. And I hope this is helpful for you guys. I know sometimes some people want to learn a little about openings, and this is the perk. I play the perk twice. So if you're looking for the perk, you have some ideas with it. Kings in attack versus the French. not many people play the French, and when people do play it, it's just too much. And I don't think that one video will be enough to get you going for that opening. But you can try it if you want. But moving your whole bunch of pawns in front of your king, if you're not sure how to go about it, you're just weakening your king and going to get checkmated. Hopefully, you can understand it in that video. Yeah, don't forget to like, subscribe, share my videos, and if you want to do even more, you can please donate anything that you would like. $5, $10, 25. I mean, even 50. 50 is perfect because 50 will allow me to go to a tournament, and I can do more of these. But yeah, thank you for your time. I believe my donation link in the description. There's chess for beginners for my PayPal, and for Cash App, I put my wife down. It's like a $ and a Snooky Boo, capital S, lowercase NUKIEBOO. So, all right. Thank you for watching. Thank you for supporting the channel. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll be back next time. And if you're in my group, we're doing a tournament with the group in lechess.org. I'll be sharing the link with in chat. All right. Thank you for your time.